All right, in this knife talk video, we're going to be talking about these knives. These are the 2018 Great Eastern Cutlery Tidioute number 14 Tc Barlows. So you can see there are two of them here. I got both. This time around, Charlie ordered one in clip point and ebony, Gabon ebony wood, and another in smooth white bone with the same clip point. So if you don't know, these are the TC or Tom's Choice Barlows. They're a special factory order by Charlie Campagna, and one of probably the more sought after of GEC's kind of runs or brands or special factory orders of knives. Charlie has done quite a few TCs, and most of them are on the 15 frame. So let me give you a quick comparison. This is a number 15 Tc Barlow. This is the first Great Eastern Cutlery knife I got. It originally was in smooth ivory bone, which is pretty much the same as this, but I dyed it, and you can see that it's quite a bit bigger. These are about 3 inches closed, the 14, and the 15 is about 3.5 inches closed. So it's a bigger knife and probably more of a medium-sized knife, more of a, it can be your only knife type deal. And these are more of a boy's knife, although this is, also called that, the traditional name for a small, usually single-bladed jack. But the number 14, like I say, is about 3 inches closed, about a 2.5-inch blade. So definitely more of a watch pocket knife. You can slip these in your watch pocket, and they usually fit in at least my jeans, or in your back pocket and really not notice it. So it's a smaller knife, definitely good for if you need, or if you live somewhere where you need to have a shorter blade, particularly if you need a blade that's under 2.5 inches. So it's good for that. But for some people, they do think that it's a little too small. I don't think that this knife is too small for, I usually carry a modern knife at the same time that I carry a traditional. The modern is typically, not always, but typically the bigger, beefier knife that I use for the heavier tasks. And for example, I really like, for a really budget-friendly knife that I don't have to worry about, to carry this Rough Rider small Barlow as my traditional, and sometimes even as a watch pocket backup. So it's even smaller. So if you're familiar with this knife, the Rough Rider small Barlow, it's even a little smaller than the Great Eastern Cutlery 14 frame, as you can see. And like I say, I use this knife. You can use this knife for real cutting and everything. So I don't think that the 14 is too small to be a usable knife, but it's definitely smaller. And, I might not choose this as my only knife if I was only going to carry one knife, which I rarely do, because I don't need to. But anyway, like I say, there's two versions. One of them, this one that I've been showing you, is in smooth white bone. The other is in Gabon ebony. So I got both because I wanted to see which I'd like better. I think that a black handle with a silver frame, and these are all steel construction, meaning the liners are not brass, and the bolsters are steel rather than nickel silver. I think that the black handles look really good with that silver color. So I wanted to see how I like that. But on the other hand, this knife, my first GEC, like I say, started out as this kind of handle. I dyed it. I did a tea bath, which some people recommend doing. It looked terrible, so then I decided to dye it black. Not that it doesn't look good, but I want to get one of these to kind of remind me of this first GEC that I had. I also really like the look of GEC's undyed bone. I think that it just looks really nice. Really simple, kind of a classic look. So I got both, and I wanted to see which one I liked better, and I think that this one is the better made of these two knives. So I'll talk about the issue that this one has a little later. But to start out here, if you are unsure or haven't seen what a Barlow is, that's just when it has an elongated bolster. So usually they say that it's at least 1/3 the total length of the knife. I don't know that that's always the case, but it's an elongated bolster over a normal, just classic bolster on a boy's knife. And you can see, or on a jackknife or a boy's knife, which is what they call the 15. To be honest, I'm forgetting what the model name is for the 14. So it's even smaller. So I think it would make sense to call this that. But anyway, that's what they call the 15. So I'm forgetting what they call the 14. But anyway, for you know, a small knife like that, it has an elongated bolster versus a jackknife or whatever. So that's what makes it a Barlow. Barlows traditionally are an inexpensive knife, and I'll talk about that in regard to these in a little bit. They're traditionally an inexpensive knife that's made sturdier so that you can really use it and kind of beat on it without worrying about it breaking. So both really good looking knives. This one's pretty close to perfect. It does maybe have ever the slightest gap, if I can catch the light here, on the mark side of the bolster between the bolster, the mark side of the spring between the spring and the bolster, and I think you can kind of see that there. Tiny little gap, but other than that, it's pretty perfect. The finish is really nice. The centering is pretty close to perfect. It has about a 6 pull, I'd say, pretty much right where I like a knife to be. Not too light, not too heavy. You can pinch it, as I just showed. Not super easily. I think, you know, once I've sharpened it a whole bunch and I have to lower the kick, I might not be able to pinch it, but you can definitely also use that long pull. And that's a really good looking clip point blade on both of them. So they both have a really nice classic clip point with the long pull and the swedge. They both seem to be ground pretty thinly, and GEC does have a CNC grinding machine now, so that's something to see, you know, if that makes their grinds even better. Their grinds have always been pretty good, but it could make them even more consistent, at least. So that'll be interesting. The edges on GEC knives aren't always the greatest. They tend to get a little bit thicker towards the tip and aren't always the most acute edges. But they seem to be pretty well done on these two knives. So for the blade and everything, it's going to be a useful knife. It's going to work well on everything. And I really like this one. This is a nice little knife. But to kind of go to that issue that I talked about, this one came with a pretty glaring issue here on the back. So this is the pile side handle, and you can see that there's a really big kind of ground in circle around this pin. And you can see it's definitely not supposed to be like this. It should have this kind of U shape here from grinding to fit it to the bolster. Doesn't have that because I think what they did is I think that they overspun this pin and really marred up that whole area around there. And then to try to cover it up, they just kind of polished it a little bit and said, it's good. But it's not good. As you can see, it's really rough around there, not just where they actually kind of took the material away around that pin, but it's really rough and not very well polished. It doesn't fit the rest of the handle, and there's a lot of that Gabon Ebony missing around that pin. So that's not really something you want to see on this knife. I think also probably from when they were polishing this, there's a little bit of a scruff or a scratch, or I'm forgetting what word I want to use, but you know what I mean. Right here, it's hard to pick up on the camera. You can probably kind of see it right now as I do that. But not a huge deal at all, but I think that it's deep enough that it would be tough to get out with just flits. So that's not really very good. And that brings me to that other point, which is these knives are way more expensive than the rest of this run. So GEC did a lot of number 14 knives on this run, and they did a lot of different special factory orders. And they were all, including the Stag, I believe, less expensive than these knives. And that includes, I believe, the two blades. So they did some with a clip point blade, main blade and a pen blade. So these are more expensive knives, and that's purely, I think, because of I don't know who exactly. I don't know if it's Charlie. I would imagine it probably is, but I don't know for sure, and I'm not criticizing anyone on this. But someone, either Charlie, the factory, or dealers, basically raising the price on these specific knives, the Tc Barlows, to try to meet the demand, right? So these knives can be sold, or previously could be sold on the secondary market, for considerably higher than their primary market price. Like this knife, not as it is now, but if you had this knife and hadn't used it as heavily as I have, I bought it for about $100, and you could sell it for, you know, upwards at least of $250 if it was in good condition. So that doesn't seem to be the case with these, and that's because rather than being around $80 to $100 like the rest of the single blade number 14s from this run, or around there, these were $144 each, and that's an expensive knife. It's more expensive than I'm usually willing to pay for a single blade traditional knife with traditional materials, meaning 1095 carbon steel and not a modern steel, and just, you know, natural materials and stuff. I think that GEC knives are very well made and are worth a higher price than some other knives because they are so well made. They're handmade. They're made in Pennsylvania near where I live, and I've met all of the people who work, or some of the people who work there, and I appreciate all of that. But what makes it not quite sit as well with me on these is that all of the other knives that are pretty much the same quality, made the same way, the same materials as these, are significantly cheaper. Like, you know, not quite, maybe like 50% more. These are 50% more expensive. Again, I think that the reason for that is to try to meet that demand, right? So if with the other TCs, you're able to buy them for $125 and sell them for $250, well, why wouldn't whoever, Charlie, the factory, the dealers, charge more on the primary market, right? If people are willing to pay that much, why wouldn't they charge more? So I get it. I'm not criticizing them for it. I think that it's a smart thing to do, and probably the right thing to do for them. And it could help make people less upset about the secondary market prices. So people kind of rankle about the fact that it's tough to get these knives and then they sell for very expensive. So maybe that'll make it a little bit easier for the people who want them to get them from dealers from the primary market rather than from the secondary market. And if so, that's a good thing. These are selling for like usually under $200 on the secondary market right now. So, you know, not the same kind of deal where you can flip them, or people could flip them like they do. And that's all right with me. I don't buy these knives to profit off of them. I buy them because I really like them, and I like to check them out and see which ones I want to keep and things like that. And usually with a GEC, you can move it along and not lose too much money. That's still the case with these, but I just find it interesting that they are significantly more expensive than the other knives made with the same materials and craftsmanship in the run, but more expensive. But again, I think that it is because they're trying to meet that demand by raising the price, so bringing them close together. But again, to bring back to why I talked about that, that's why I can't really overlook this issue. So it's just not something that I think is okay on a $144 knife. And so I actually emailed the dealer. Again, I like to say who I buy from because it's not a secret. I'm not trying to keep other people from buying from him. Ken at Blue Creek Cutlery has always given me really good service. And, you know, if you go there and buy a knife from him because I said that he has good service, you know, I'm sure it would be good to hear from him that I sent you his way. So let him know that Logan sent you his way if you do buy a knife from him. I don't get anything out of it, but, you know, I'm sure that it's good for him to know or whatever. But I've always gotten good service from him. I emailed him and he said that he does have a replacement. So I'm happy about that because, like I say, I just don't think that I can overlook that issue on a knife of this price. And if you saw my unboxing video of these knives, you know that I also, on the same day that I got these, got the Elijah Isham Black Star. So this is a similarly sized knife. It's a similarly designed knife. I mean, not super similarly, but it's a clip point. It's a non-locking knife. It's, you know, black handle, and all that kind of stuff. And this was $150 shipped. This was $144 shipped. Now, these were actually made, I think, in lower numbers than these. So I believe they made 150 of each color. They made a black handled one, black G10, and a green handled one, green G10. And I believe that they only made 150 of each. I'm not sure, but I think that they made 250 of each of these. I'll have to check on that when they put the production schedule out, but I think that that's what they did. So this is actually a rarer knife, this Elijah Isham Black Star. Now, there's a big difference in the production. This is made in China by, I believe, We Knife Company, and, you know, very machine made, right? This is made by machines, but machines that are being really controlled and crafted by artisans, right? It really is handmade in the United States by a small company with, you know, a few really dedicated employees. So there is a difference, and I don't mean to compare the way that these are manufactured. They're very different. But being that they're very comparable in price, and this one is actually more rare, one big difference is the materials, right? So this one has 1095 steel. Fine steel, nothing wrong with it. It rusts really easily, but it's easy to sharpen and stuff. This has M390, so, you know, really good steel, about as good as it gets, to be honest, for an EDC knife. It has G10, like I said, and really nice carbon fiber. And then it has a sculpted titanium clip. So Gabon Ebony is really nice, but I think that the materials probably cost more on this Elijah Isham and Black Star, or Isham. So it's just a comparison here for you to see that when these TCs start getting pricier because of demand, which is, I believe, why they got pricier, they start to come up against some knives that, you know, because of this traditional, modern traditional trend, can have pretty nice materials, pretty nice manufacturing for, you know, the same price, and even sometimes rare like this. So it's just something to be aware of. I think that this, honestly, purely from a materials and construction standpoint, is a better deal. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to stop buying GEC knives. I really appreciate the fact that these are handmade in Pennsylvania by a small company. I think it's great what Bill Howard and Bill Howard Jr. are doing to, you know, reinvigorate the traditional knife market. And I think that they're doing a great job, and for the most part, their knives are really nice. This one just shouldn't have been let out of the factory like this. So I'm sure that they will take that into account. You know, I'm sure Ken will send this to them and they'll take a look at it, and hopefully they make sure that that doesn't happen again. I just think for this price, for $144, with the price coming up to meet demand, like I've said a bunch of times, it can't have that kind of issue. But to kind of go back to the positives, like I say, Ken at Blue Creek Cutlery is going to send me a replacement, and I'll do a second video on that. So keep an eye out for that. And this one, the smooth white bone, doesn't have those issues, right? Very tiny gap, not a big deal. But everything else is really nice on this knife. Like I say, really nice pull, no blade play. You know, there is a small little scratch right here on the tang of the knife. That could even be from transport. That's not a big deal to me either. But one last thing I wanted to say, they do come with a pin, so I know some people really like that, and they come in a tube with a kind of write-up from Charlie Campagna. So you can pause this and read this if you'd like. It's kind of about the yin-yang duality of the black and white handles, and those can be, you know, interesting to read and everything. But I just wanted to make a video showing these two knives, showing the issue on this knife, talking about the value, and everything like that. If you've enjoyed it, please like. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I like to try to answer all of them. Subscribe to my channel. That way you can get updates when I do post videos about new knives and about the replacement for this knife. And don't forget to go out and do good.